Hello, and welcome back to Stories from the Ashes, where we pontificate on good books and the stories that define and refine us. I'm Amber, and I am here with Amanda and author Dawn L. Watkins. Welcome, Dawn.
Thank you.
Today we will be discussing Dawn's Medallion trilogy and watching Amber try not to fangirl all over the place. So best of luck to us all with that. But in all seriousness, for the majority of you, the Medallion trilogy is the best series that you have not read yet. So we are glad that you are here. Before we jump in to talking about the books, Dawn, would you like to give us some of your career highlights? How long you've been writing for, how many books you've published, maybe share a few of your favorite books or authors from when you were a kid. That's one of my favorite ways to get to know someone fast, is to know what they've read.
Well, as a child, fairy tales were my absolute favorite thing to be read to. Fables, Aesop's Fables. Later, Little House on the Prairie books, Little House books, of course. Mm-hmm. Anything westward movement, I was all into the pioneer thing.
Westward expansion.
But fairy tales, first and foremost, even still.
Yeah, those are beautiful. So you've written a lot of books. I know that you have written curriculum, but also a lot of fiction, picture books, and
yes,
chapter books. Do you know off the top of your head how many books you've published of those?
This morning I thought, you might ask me that. I should look that up. And I don't really know.
Yeah.
I know inside the cover of Arrow, there's a list of ones that have my Dawn L. Watkins pen name on there. I have some that have a different pen name that do not appear there. So I don't know, 14 maybe?
What's your other pen name, or is it secret?
Oh, it's not a secret. It's Morgan, Reed, Parson, which are family names all bunched together. I wrote a book called, which one is that? Oh my goodness. No Pets Allowed. And the people that were publishing at that time said, oh, you should use a different pen name on that one. And so I gave them a different pen name. And that appears on some short stories and things too. So
very cool. Whatever. I own that book. I did not realize it was yours. That's funny. When I was a kid, my parents would always give us books at Christmas. And so when we were younger, I remember getting A King for Brass Cobwebs and Very Like a Star. And then as I got older, I got Jenny Wren and then Medallion when I was 10. And I was talking to my mom and sisters earlier this week about how I was going to talk to you and try not to fangirl. And my younger sisters, who are 6, 7, and 7 years younger than me, they were like, oh my goodness, we loved those books. And my mom was like, I cried every time I read Jenny Wren. That was such a great book. And so they definitely had a lasting effect in our family. So yeah,
authors are kind of ghoulish because it makes us happy when you cry.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I was racking my brain trying to figure out how I could possibly share an overview of the series without completely giving it away and doing it justice. But luckily, I don't have that burden anymore because I outsourced it. So we host a reading challenge every year through Reshelving Alexandria, our Facebook community. And we do adult challenges and kid challenges. So last year, we had a whole bunch of kids finish their reading challenge, and we did a drawing for some prizes, and 2 boys who were 10 won the drawing, and they happened to be best friends. So I thought, how fun would it be to send them Medallion so that they both have the same story and they can incorporate it into their play and have someone to talk to about it, because I always was bummed as a kid when I couldn't talk to anybody about it. And I see that with my oldest daughter when I haven't read a book that she's read. She's like, just read it already because I need to talk to you. So I sent them both the book, just Medallion. And then their poor mothers were on the hook for getting the rest of the series because they wanted them. And so I reached out to one of the moms and asked if her son would have any questions for you, or if he would be interested in doing our mailbag. So we do a kids mailbag on the show where they get to write in and just hype a book that they really liked and share share it with people. So I thought if he wanted to do Medallion, he could. And she said he hated writing and she wasn't sure if he'd be willing to do it. And then 30 minutes later, she wrote back and she's like, he's in. He is so excited to be able to share about this book. And so here is the review submitted by Owen, age 10. And he says, Medallion is one of the best books I've ever read. At the beginning, Trave, a boy who should be the king of Gadala, is kind of foolish and doesn't think before he acts. But then he meets Gris, the king of Capnos, who tells him about a medallion that gives the owner the right to the throne of Gadala. Once he learns about the medallion, Trave is determined to find it, and the book is about what happens on his journey. I love how throughout the book, Gris teaches Trave how to be a good king. I like how Trave learns from his mistakes and makes good choices after he's acted foolishly. He reminded me a little bit of Edmund from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I also love the extra things like the map that the author put in the front of the book to help picture the different kingdoms and see where things are located. I think that kids who like the Chronicles of Narnia and the Wingfeather Saga would also like this book. After I read it, I couldn't wait to read the next one. I hope you enjoy it. So that's
very well written.
It is. I was like, this is perfect. So that's Medallion. And I read Medallion when I was 10, and I read it and read it and read it and read it into tatters. And it was incredibly influential in my life, Dawn. I was personally challenged by the themes of honor, dignity, trust, respect, and integrity. And then in 2008, after I was an adult, you wrote the sequel, or the prequel, Shield. And I missed it because I was an adult and it had been so long. And I didn't think you were going to be writing, because we were looking on Library of Congress. You wrote Medallion in 1985?
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah. So I found it when it had already been out for a while. But then in Reshelving Alexandria, I met your stepdaughter, and she saw me recommending Medallion to people, and she was like, I don't know if you know, but like, she wrote a book that came before it, and she's in the middle of writing one that came after. And I was like, hold the presses. Like, where has this been? So I grabbed Shield, and then in 2021, last year, is when the sequel, Arrow, was written, if I have that timeline correct. And those are some huge jumps for world building. So I have to know, in the beginning, when you wrote Medallion, did you know the whole story arc, and just like George Lucas decided to just drop us in the middle of it and be like, fend for yourselves, everyone, I'll come back later? Or did you write Medallion, which wraps up nicely at the end and could just be a standalone if it needed to be, but then decided to write more as more came to you? What was your process in building that world?
Each of the books stand alone.
Yes.
So you could read one and not either of the others.
Right.
And you'd have a whole story.
I agree.
But in the beginning, I did have a trilogy in mind, emphasizing the 3 Christian virtues of faith, hope, and love. Mm-hmm. And each of the books has all those elements, mm-hmm. but pushes one more forward than the others.
Yeah.
So I did have that in mind. I don't have an outline, or I have big ideas that I want to get to, and whatever happens. Sometimes I don't even know what's going to happen. I remember one time and I used to tell people this, and then some thought that I was a little crazy, so I stopped telling it. But in the middle of the scene in Medallion where Gris takes Trave to Enna, mm-hmm. and she has that bottle she's going to give him, I honestly didn't know what she was going to say. So mm-hmm. as truly as I can express this, I stood with Trave and waited to hear what she would say. Mm-hmm. And she said something, and I thought, oh, I should write that down. That's good. That's good. I'll write that down. So things happen in the story, and I'm willing to go with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I'm also in control of it. It's not willy-nilly. It's not free writing.
Right.
But I also like the characters to inform me of things. I wrote a book called Zoli's Legacy, and I put a character in there just for a specific reason, and he just refused to leave. So I had to. He stayed till the end. He wouldn't go.
That's awesome. And the Zoli's Legacy, it's a 2-book. Is that a series or is it just a continuation?
It was in 2 parts. Now it's in 1 volume.
Okay. I have the 2 parts, so that's
same
book. So do you find yourself putting yourself in all of the characters' positions, or do you more relate to one as you're writing the story?
Oh, that's a very good question. I tend to stay more with one, but I enter into others in order to have them speak authentically.
Okay.
I don't want them all speaking the same. So, for instance, Rinsen speaks differently from Enna.
Yeah.
But I'm in their heads when they're speaking.
Okay.
Right.
So you said that each book more pushes forward one theme than the other. Which book do you associate with which theme?
Okay. Shield is faith.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of told in the title there. Medallion is love. Okay. And Arrow is hope.
Okay, that's great. So since
you said for example, in Shield, many of the characters have to just do what they know to be right without any net.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
They just do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the point of that book. Sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, no, that's fine. I was wondering if so since they're all standalone, is there a order that you recommend reading them in? Is there, with Narnia, you always go through the
Okay, another good question. In the beginning, back in the 80s, a long time ago, Medallion was what do you call it, a command book or whatever. I was told, write a book that goes with the reading program.
Oh,
for 4th grade.
Oh, interesting.
So I did. I wrote Jenny Wren, and then they said, well, could you change the main character to a boy and put the setting in California? And I said, no. Can't do that.
Write a whole new book. Why don't you?
Because they decided that boys will read about boys and girls will read about boys, but boys don't want to read about girls. That was the thinking. So I said, no, I'll just write a whole new book. Just forget it. I'll just write a new book. So I wrote Medallion. And so that was a 4th grade. So they didn't ask me for the next grade or the next, but I wanted my trilogy to be complete. So I decided the next one, which happened to be Shield, would be on the 5th grade level, and this last one would be on the 6th grade level. So if you want to read them in order of complexity, that would be the way. If you want to read them chronologically, that's totally fine. Mm-hmm. If you want to read them all out of order, that's fine.
Yeah. I was just telling Amber I liked that they increased in complexity and reading ability, because I thought that would be a great way if you had a reluctant reader and you wanted to help them get into the next reading level. Mm-hmm. That'd be a great way to start them with Medallion.
If you have a reluctant reader or a reader with problems, maybe even a 5th grader, who you could start them with Medallion.
Yeah.
And then move on.
Build confidence. Yeah. So Amanda and I had a ton of conversations about Gris.
Yes.
And I know she wanted to ask you some questions about him.
I did want to ask you about what your inspiration was for him, because he doesn't seem like a character that you just come up with. He seems like that maybe he
seems
based
real
in something. He seems real.
Yeah.
And he's really admirable, and I don't know, I would like to know that person for real, like in real life.
Well, I drew a lot on my grandfather. In fact, when Medallion first came out, a relative of mine was reading it, and said to me, "Is this king anybody we know?"
Did you know? Did they know who it was?
Maybe. So very much of his humanity is my grandfather. Other literary elements played in there, Red Cross Knight and different admirable characters. But I think what you're sensing there is actually my grandfather. Okay. He's also the basis of Mr. Logan and Jenny Wren.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just loved his character.
I loved him. I loved him as a kid. Like, I wanted to be him. I wanted to know him. I definitely wanted to marry someone like him. he was just like, he just seemed like such a person you could trust, like so trustworthy, and someone that you could put your faith in and know that they were going to do right by you and make the wisest decisions that they could, and that they had the experience necessary to know what would be the wisest decision in any given situation. So I really loved him.
He reminds me a little of Mr. Knightley.
Yeah.
In Emma, because he's, the steady, strong character, full of integrity, not gonna like sugarcoat everything for you, and not gonna pull
definitely
back.
Willing to call you out on your shortcomings when necessary.
But, yes.
Yeah, can reprove you in love, like that. Just that was his character.
I did marry a man very like, and so in the Arrow, he played a part in that, and in fact, the artist I think used him as a model for the pictures.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, I love that. That's very neat. So that's the men that we loved from the books, but I also love the wise women like Kala and Miris, and they remind me of I just loved books like that when I was a kid. Like, I wanted to be those wise women who didn't just treat the body but treated the soul, but they had the wisdom to treat the body because they had educated themselves and were in tune with nature. So we have like those wise women in this story. And I loved how Kala knew all about the herbs and had studied under people who knew that, and then Enna studies under Kala, and so she's able to take care of the people that need her and that she loves. And then you have Miris, who is very in line with our whole Reshelving Alexandria mission of building home libraries and preserving culture, and she has all the hidden books, right, from the university that they hid before the culling of the books. And so she's doing cultural preservation as a way that she is showing love to the people who matter most to her at large. And so I really respect that about her. And so I always am trying to collect stories like this. So there's the wise woman and the wise women in these books. There's the wise woman grandma in the Bracken trilogy. There's the grandmother in The Princess and the Goblin. Did you have other characters who had influenced your wise women in your books, or were those just women you knew?
Those were women I knew. I had a very wonderful collection of people around me when I was young. My grandfather's cousin, his age, taught all the girls in our community how to sew and cook. But we went there and we learned those things. But what we actually learned from her was extraordinary contentment and calmness. She had an easy life. She lost 2 grown sons in lumbering accidents. Her other son nearly died when he was young from diphtheria. I mean, she didn't have an easy life. But I never heard one word of complaint from her about anything. And she was always willing to listen. But she didn't pull any punches either. If you needed to know a thing about yourself, she would tell you. My grandmother, very wise on how to get along with strong men. You know, my grandfather was a great man, but he did have his ways, and she just knew how to deal, you know?
Yeah.
And so it was all the women around me, more than I can say any one literary character. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Our influences come from many places. I
did draw on Proverbs 31 and on the prophetess Deborah for Calla.
That reminds me of Joe's Boys. We're reading about Meg and Joe's Boys, and she teaches a lot of the community women to sew and cook and like household skills, not just as a way of teaching them household skills, but teaching them character building skills too.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I love that. So would you say that those were the large influences of honor in your life? Because I just feel like honor is such a strong theme in these books. So was it just those relationships?
Well, every adult I knew emphasized that if you made a promise, you keep the promise. And you would not do anything to dishonor the people. Like if I did something dishonorable that would dishonor my grandmother or my grandfather, I couldn't have that, you know. I mean, I did, but I felt really bad about it. Trying to fix it.
Yeah. I love that. So between the book Shield and then into Arrow, and I guess also including Medallion a little bit, but mostly from Shield to Arrow, my daughter saw some changes in the pronunciation guides.
Right. So that goes back to that curriculum novel thing. Because they were teaching reading and phonics and whatnot, they wanted the names to follow the rules of pronunciation that they were teaching. It wasn't always the way I heard those words in my head.
Yeah.
But I was a child. I had no say.
Right.
Okay. Right. But the book has now been disconnected really from the reading program. So now I'm free to say, this is how it's said in Capnos, and this is how it's said in Godala, and let's get this fixed. So the way they are presented in Arrow, that's the way I hear them in my head.
So Inara is...
Yes, Inara.
Is how you... Okay, so Inara is my eldest daughter, and her name is spelled Inara, and for those listening, yes, she is named after the Inara that you're thinking of. But it's an Arabic name, and it means ray of light, heaven sent. And naming is incredibly important in our family. And so she did not have any expectation of ever finding herself in literature. And so she was beyond thrilled. Like when we read Shield first, and she was like, oh, it's so close. And so like we were reading it based on that pronunciation guide, which I think was Inara. And then when we got Arrow and she like flipped to the back, she's like, she changed it. It's my name now. So
it's always been that way. It's just not been recorded appropriately.
I will let her know that is going to be so exciting to her. So you were talking about the different languages and how they're pronounced in different languages. So Owen's best friend, Sam, who also got your book, Sam's question was that Trave says that umbo means shield handle, but he wants to know in which language from which country does it mean that?
Ingadala.
Ingadala. All right, we will let Sam know that. And then back to the naming. So my question is, at the end of Shield, when Inara is told that now in Capnos she will be known as Lady Enna, what does Enna mean? Like, what is the story behind him picking that name for her?
Okay. She is, as a Dieterin, she is in on Calla's secrets. You know, she knows. Mm-hmm. So she's innermost. And then because she goes into the towers, she's allowed into the tower. She's allowed into the presence of the prince who is becoming king right in front of her face, you know. Right. She's in. Okay, so in Capnosian, the word is Enna, and in Dieter, it's Inara.
Inara. Okay, very cool. I will pass that on. She'll be very excited to hear all about it. So one of Sam's other questions was just the world building in general of the different countries and how you picked them and how many there were. And he didn't have a specific question. He just really wanted to hear you talk more about the lands and countries.
All right. In the beginning, Capnos and its capital sort of represent the ideal country. Mm-hmm. These people have discipline and honor and generosity, camaraderie. They look out for each other. They are very full of individuals. I mean, they're not all the same kind of person, but they have a culture that's a little more advanced than the other countries. Mm-hmm. Gadala was well on its way until Panay took over, lazy Panay.
Yes.
And part of Griss's whole mindset is not just to have Capnos be a good country, but all the alliance countries to be good countries, and yet themselves. And Dieter, I like Dieter. If you ask me which country I would live in, that would be the one.
Yeah.
Because, well, it's less populated. It has Taruta. I don't know. It just suits me. I like Dieter. Mm-hmm. But anyway, and then Trave, you know, takes on the restoration of his country and the restoration of Sarda. Mm-hmm. Because, lo and behold, he has Sardan blood. I don't know if you noticed, but there's not a lot of pedigree, shall we say. That people like Bachmal married Griss's first cousin. Right. And because, you know, remember when he's running around and he's thinking about, he's a kid and he's looking for her, but he says, he rolls it around his mouth, Lord Bachmal, and he thinks he likes the sound of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Then he becomes one because he marries into the royal family of Capnos. So what did you ask me? I'm totally off the track.
No, we're talking about the countries and the lands in general.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, I wanted them to be representative of stages of good culture. Mm-hmm. So some are not at all. They're, you know, Latoris is, you know, Sarda, Phil. So it's kind of a parallel with the characters making progress toward a noble life.
I feel like in the differences of the countries, you can really see how a leader can make a huge difference in the culture and can set it on a path that extends for years and years and years.
Yes. Or and see that's why in Shield Leorian keeps trying to salvage his country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when he realizes that he can't, then it becomes I must salvage myself. I must do what I need to do to maintain my integrity, my nobility.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's another really honorable character. With a lot of wisdom.
Yeah.
I did have a question about Trave because I was very confused when I was reading Medallion about how old he was. At the beginning of the book, I'm thinking he's like 9, 10. At the end of the book, I'm thinking, no, he must be older. He has to be like 15, 16.
He is 10 going on 11 throughout, but it's his mental maturity that you're sensing.
That changes.
He has left his boyhood right when Gris gives him the medallion and says, you have to go back on your own. That's a point at which he stops being this self-centered child and begins his journey to become fully king. Now, he is king in name, but he is not totally king until something happens in Arrow.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
No spoiler alert.
Yes, thank you. But yeah, no, I really liked watching him mature, because Amanda and I were having this conversation the other night about how old he was, and I thought he was younger, like more in the 10, 11 range. And I was like, I think that he's growing up, and some kids are able to take those outside voices, take those experiences and hardships and mature from them. And I really felt that we used to have a pastor who would always say that men needed to mature at the rate of need, not at the rate of convenience. And I really felt that with Trave, that like he steps up when it's needed, like he's able to mature at that rate. And so yeah, that makes sense for him.
Also, the character Nog makes progress as well. He's in Shield, a young man like Gris, and he's a capable poet, as he has a song that is quite popular among many cultures throughout the ages there. But he's a poet. He's very sensitive and very introverted, and he doesn't do well with war and losing friends. And Trave's mother, he just doesn't deal well. So he thinks retreating and hiding will spare him the pains of life, but it doesn't work. We know that. And so when he emerges and comes above the ground again, his poetry increases in texture and value, so that in isolation it degrades into almost a doggerel. But when he is among others and required to share his gift, it improves.
Yeah.
Amber and I were just debating about that too the other night. How does Nog go from being a court poet to living underground? There seems like there should be more story there. Is there another?
There's more story there. There's just not room in the book for all the elaboration.
Are you familiar with S.D. Smith's The Green Ember series?
Yes.
So it has the 4 books, and then it has like the little books that go in between. And I was telling Amanda, I was like, I really need Dawn to write some little books that go in between for me that fill in those gaps.
Well, actually, I'm mulling over writing the Book of Mirrors. You know that white book? that needs to, the pages, we need to know what those pages say, because it contains their mythology, their fairy tales, their history from her perspective, of course, and some pictures.
I have goosebumps right now. Like, you really need to write this.
Oh, great. I've just thrown my hat over the fence. I said I was mulling it.
Expectations.
I was mulling it. Well, I'm studying Hans Christian Andersen's stories right now, trying to really understand what makes a fairy tale,
mm-hmm.
and what makes it a good fairy tale.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know Vigen and Guroian. He wrote Tending the Heart of Virtue. It's a book on the moral imagination. He told me that magic in stories, in fairy tales, is an analog for grace. Oh. And that really set me to thinking. And then you asked me about mystery and magic.
Yeah, because there's like little elements that could be considered magical somewhat in the book. And then you refer to them at one point as mystery, like somebody asks a point blank question about it. And the response, I have it right here, that Trave says, I don't know. That is a mystery. And I was just like, oh, that's so good, because Inara and I are finishing Enchantress from the Stars. And if you haven't read it, you would probably really enjoy it. It's a science fiction book, but it doesn't really feel like it. So it's a culture from the future, or not from the future. It's a culture that has progressed more than a culture now would. And then there's a culture that has just started exploring other planets. And then there's a culture where you basically feel like you're still in the Middle Ages. They're talking like the Middle Ages. That's their understanding. And so they view her with her advanced science understanding and advanced mental and physical understandings as an enchantress. And so she's talking in this letter that she's writing back to her cousin about the mission, about, is it really magic or is it science? Like, does it matter? And is it the same thing? Are they right in their thinking? Are we wrong in our thinking? And so I felt that in this portion when Trave just says it's a mystery. And I told Amanda, I was like, like there's a river that runs one direction for part of the day and another direction for another part of the day. And she's like, absolutely explainable.
Okay.
I didn't know it was explainable, but I could totally see that being explainable and like, not being magic. Just, we don't understand it yet.
Right. Magic gets tarnished by misuse of it. I look at mystery and magic that occurs from outside to be kind of on par as analogs for grace, as Vigen says, or in my mind, for those things that cannot be explained but are for your good. And you don't have to explain it. You don't have to understand it. I always tell people it's an advantage to me that I'm not the sharpest crayon in the box, because I am not so bothered as some more intellectual people by having to have everything explained in concrete terms, or at least be able to be comprehended in order to be absorbed and accepted. I'm perfectly happy, even happier, to accept some things that can't be explained, but from which I draw good. To be there. They're just there. Yeah. So this thing that Trave encounters, I don't say explicitly that it did happen. I say it might have happened. Right. I give that. And for him, it did happen. And it was transformational for him. It's very important for him. And things happen in your normal life that are very transformational, which may seem to you magical, but to someone in a different perspective could be like, oh, I understand how that happened. Doesn't matter. It's the point. The point is that you got out of that what you needed.
That's beautiful. I'll be looking forward to that book.
Oh dear.
With its lovely white cover. But speaking of Miras's book, like one of the things that I loved was watching characters age and still be completely vital to the story. And I feel that so often kids are reading books that are focused on like just their age group, or maybe the parents happen to have not been killed off before the story started, you know, but like they don't really have these good, strong mentors, or maybe they have one. But I feel like these are like family group stories, and not everybody's still alive, but like older generations are still alive and present and active, and their wisdom is sought out, and they are treated with dignity and respect. And
I do make a point of that in that Tanarad goes to his father and says, I need wisdom. Right. I need help.
Yeah.
And other people approach the older people for help. And I don't know if you're going to ask this, but I want to get it in.
Please do.
Women approach men for help. Mm-hmm. See, Anna did what she could in that circumstance of captivity. I'm not ruining anything if I say that right.
No, you're fine.
She did what she could, which is good. She's a strong woman. She's smart, you know. But she knows she can't deal with what is going on. She needs help. So she repairs to Nog.
Yep.
And he has to respond because he is honor bound. Mm-hmm. She has appealed to him. She's a woman. She's appealed to him. He has to go. He hasn't any choice, you know. That's how it works. So I like that. I have no problem with that. And I wanted to show how femininity needn't be distorted in order to be strong.
Yes.
Femininity has its strengths. Masculinity has its strengths. Mm-hmm. They work very nicely together.
Yeah, they really do.
Because sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say when Gris takes Trave to Enna, like they're seeking her help because they need it. Yes. And so I see it going both ways all the time. Like everyone has their different strengths, and no one is ashamed to approach someone else based on age or gender or rank even.
Right. And Enna, you know, helps that boy. She doesn't need to. Mm-hmm. Most people wouldn't.
Right.
But she has that strength of integrity. Mm-hmm. She knows that she knows what can be done, and she knows she should tell him. She does. Yeah. And the effect that has. But that's a feminine tactic, if you want to call it that, to bring somebody toward the light. Mm-hmm. And Gris has a different approach, but still they worked in tandem to work on that boy. So
throughout the books, there's a lot of people helping when they might, in our modern culture, they might not have, like you go fend for yourself, and there's a lot of just helping each other for the sake of helping each other, strangers.
Because it is the thing to do.
Yes.
It is the right thing to do. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I love how we get to meet some people who have unintentionally helped people in Medallion, and then we get to see them intentionally helping people in Arrow, and just know that is their true heart, and that is who they are, and they responded to the appreciation that they received from the last person and are continuing to live their lives with that strength and dignity and honor in order to appreciate it. I'm trying not to spoil anything right now, but I just really appreciated that. And I will say that exchange ended with me thinking, we need another little book at the end of this book so that she can slide in when those two people meet up together again.
When Trave meets Cass, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Miris won't know about that. Miris is gone.
I know. So. That's why we need another one. We need yet another book.
Amber will keep you writing forever. She would never get enough books. So.
It's true. It's true. But yes, that was wonderful. Was there anything else that you wanted to cover that we haven't covered?
Well, even though the books stand alone and each have their capital virtue, Christian virtue, there are other virtues that intertwine among the books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because not only are the characters on a journey, I'm hoping the reader is on a journey and is collecting up a desire, if not an intention, to live wisely and perhaps also some patterns by which to do so.
Yeah.
If you can think, well, what would happen? What would Gris say should happen here? Or how would Miris respond to that? You know?
Yeah.
Because she has courage. Miris has courage.
Yeah, absolutely.
But she's a different kind of courage from Calla.
Right.
But they still are both very much influencers on those who come behind them.
Yeah. Well, I will say that if that was your goal in writing these books, you succeeded in my life, because I definitely have thought of Gris often over the years. And as Amanda said, he is similar to Mr. Knightley, and that's who I married. I married my Mr. Knightley and King Gris, and so I just I look forward to continuing to watch my husband age and be able to even, offer wisdom down to further generations like Gris did. But I really appreciate the modeling that was in those books, and just watching Trave be humbled, I feel saved me from needing to be humbled in some of those same areas myself. Like, I didn't have to go through the hard work of it, because I was able to say, oh yeah, that's what that looks like, and that does not seem pleasant. So maybe we skip that step and just go straight to realizing we are not everything. So, but yeah, so I really am grateful.
Let me mention this too. The children in Arrow have their things they need to learn as well. Calty is a little vain, a little preoccupied with appearance at first. And Bruce is very into his position, and he has things to learn yet, even at the end of the book, but at least we know that he will.
Yes.
Is that another book that you'll be writing?
What, Amanda?
So is that another book you'll be writing about him?
3 is such a nice number.
But 7 is even better. With Bruce, in the first chapter of that book, I read it and I chuckled to myself, and my daughter was sitting there having already read it. And she's like, what are you laughing about? And I was like, well, I'm just thinking that Bruce is an apple that did not fall far from the tree. She's like, yes, very true.
One more thing I appreciated, I'm almost done with S.H.I.E.L.D., and I have noticed in that book there's not a lot of details about the marriages, but there's some beautiful marriages represented. You see little snapshots of that, and I really appreciate that too for a children's book that's in there. There's some good modeling there too.
Thank you.
Especially when they're not ready for a romance, but you need to see those good things.
Right. I didn't,
anyway.
This isn't an appropriate age for talking about romance, but I did need to show that, Trave saw this girl later and was like, oh, she grew up. But if you want to know my favorite moment in any of all three books is when Gris says to Enna, "Oh, there you are," after all that had gone on. And she turns around because she knows it's his step, and she turns and he goes, "Well, there you are."
It's beautiful. I love it. And I will say there's a lot about Gris and Enna's relationship that requires a book in between Medallion and Arrow. And my
I'm gonna let you know on something. I asked my editor to sit in with me today. She's in the room with me because I've never done one of these before, and I didn't. I just needed her to be there. So she's heard you say this. So.
Oh, so now there might be another voice saying that. Yeah, we can do another book.
Yeah, absolutely. You write it. I will market it. We will get it out there.
Okay. You're very kind. And I'm glad Gris was there for you when you were a kid.
Yeah.
I think my grandfather would be astonished to know how many children he has helped.
Yeah. That's quite a legacy.
It is. Yeah. That comes with honor, right? When you live an honorable life, this is what Proverbs says will be the result of it.
And I did pick that up even as a child, because I saw some of my grandfather's friends whose lives were not as honorable and what happened to their families. And that stuck with me. I mean, I saw that. I made a mental note of that when I was like 8. So.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, I wanted to share with you the copy of Medallion that I picked up was obviously an older copy, but this one came with another inscription saying, from Charlie Jones, Merry Christmas to his friend, saying, "This was my favorite book that I read with my class last spring." And this was from 2004. So I didn't feel like it's fair that authors don't get to hear all these things about how many children they've affected and how many people's favorite book you wrote. So I wanted you to know yet another child that I don't know, but he loved your book and it was his favorite book too.
Thank you. That was very sweet.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we will have a separate little episode if you guys are interested in, where we have a few major spoilers that we talk about with Dawn, if you guys want to find that episode. But we just want to thank Dawn so much for being here with us today. This was so wonderful for me, and I hope for you too.
Thank you. It's very nice of you. Very nice of you to call.
Yeah, so Dawn's books will be linked in our show notes, and you guys can order those and get reading and sharing them with your friends. And we'd appreciate it if you subscribe and leave a review. And remember, the stories are truer than true, and we will see you next time.